You all folks are getting a very special treatment. I don't know any place else in the country anywhere. We get to do pre-flight on these two P47s with the pilots. Later we'll have more, because you'll want to hear the stories about P47 combat pilot. He'll tell you what it was like to fly during the 40s. But for now, let's go learn how to fire up this plane. What it takes to get it ready. Take your cameras, you guys want shots. We'll take some portraits too.
So what you guys learned so far? Oh, you do this then. So, okay. Two fuel ports, right? Okay. Assuming that the ground crew does a lot of that
over here because we're splitting.
The pilot's job is just basically seen walking around the airplane. So that looks good on the NTSB report. They always say that. It says pilot seen walking around airplanes. That presumes the pilot actually did a whole lot of stuff, which we don't really like to do. First thing we do, we walk up, we like to just look at the propeller. Because since the last flight, the prop has about 2 gallons of oil in the dome. And we like it to stay there. That controls the prop. So you look at you take a visual inspection of the roots of the blades, see if they've been slinging any oil. And this prop looks pretty good. This is actually a brand new prop. It has about 2 flight hours on it. Oh, wow. We keep two props and we recycle them for overhaul. Every 5 years, these props have an AD that we have to take them apart for inspection, and a qualified prop shop has to do that.
When you say a prop, you mean a set of props, right?
Well, yeah, well, that's
Single
the entire assembly. It comes off the prop shaft, and it's a rather complex thing. And they're getting pretty pricey. This propeller alone is about $60,000 to $70,000 worth of equipment, just the propeller. You can't buy the blades anymore, so the blades themselves, if you bought a blade, about $25,000 to buy a blade from somebody. If you have all four, the assembly is there. So it's an important piece of equipment, and it runs the whole airplane. It weighs about, I guess it probably weighs about 1,100 pounds. 13 feet. 13 feet, 2 inches. And the pilot's job is to just get something that he sees might have happened since the last flight. So we'll look around the ignition harness, the front of the cylinders, make sure a bird or something hasn't been ingested. Just take a visual. And I like to look, I get my exercise for the day since I'm short. Look down the intake, since this airplane takes its air down to the turbo housing and returns it to the carburetor. It makes a long trip. And at air shows, kids like to throw soda cans and stuff. So we look down the center. You can walk up and you can look down the center and see the actual intake. Take a peek. Boy, actually it's fun to look at, because that's where the air goes, and it hits those 2 ducts at the end, and those return back to the carburetor. So we're looking for visual. That looks good. And eyeball the cowling latch covers. There's about 15 of those. Behind those are mechanical over-center latches that keep the cowling on the airplane. And this is where you get the sense of what size airplane this is. It's it's a hefty thing, and that's when sheet metal was sheet metal on airplanes. We walk by and check the cowl doors. These are all hinged, and they're on a single control mechanism that they all operate in and out. It's hydraulic, but there's a whole bunch of push levers and little hinges that operate these, so they're all together. That's kind of loose and nice. We look for any obvious signs of oil or stuff gushing out, and we want to make sure there is plenty of that, because it's a Thunderbolt. Gear door, everybody checks their gear. We just stick in and take a quick look in there. There's lots of hard lines, hydraulic lines, some fuel lines that are going across the gear wells to the top. We're looking for any sign of any obvious leaks. Looking for any big leaks. There's always leaks, but we're looking for those big gushers.
Is that oil extension on the strut you have there?
No, sir. The gear on the Thunderbolt is really, really unique. It's a 2-chamber oleo stream.
Very well.
Yeah, right. It's nitrogen over hydraulic fluid, and this the oleo extension is about that long. Well, it's this long.
Okay.
Now on the back side, which you can't see from there, but over here there's a tube that connects, a rod that connects up here. It's called the shrink tube, and it's connected to the bottom. When the oleo is fully extended, the entire gear length is longer than the opening in the wheel well. So there's an over-center action as the gear travels. This rod runs out of length and mechanically pulls the gear, the strut, back, collapses it so that it will fit. It's a very critical piece. We have to inspect the weld on the top and bottom fitting of that, because if it fails during the retract, the gear, if it gets in there, can actually expand and lock itself into the wheel well, or it can hit down here and fail to close. The second one is preferred because then you can actually extend it and come back in. But there's a 2-chamber operating system here, since you have to have enough pressure to actually have a gear shock absorber, but it can't be so much pressure that you have to be able to collapse it without it being on the way of the airplane. The over-center rod has to be able to do that. That as the gear travels through 45 degrees of swing, there's a relief valve on the top of the cylinder that has a rod that comes down to a valve that's in here that opens and allows pressure to move from the lower chamber to the upper chamber. There's 2 chambers here. So as that valve opens, at the same time that it's trying to be squeezed down by the pull rod, the shrink tube, then it runs out, it would overly compress itself, and the shrink rod couldn't do its job. That valve opens and allows it to have a larger chamber for the gas to pressure into so that it can easily compress. And then it reverses that as it swings back open. As it goes through 45, that valve closes and all the pressure is then working in just this lower half of the cylinder, and you've got a nice cushiony ride. Now we've put GoPros on these airplanes a lot and see how the strut works, but I can tell you that it's about this long on landing, and it compresses to that, and then once it compresses, doesn't matter what we drive over, it doesn't do anything. I mean, it just stays just like that. We can leave here when we take off, drive over rough terrain or bad runway or taxiways, and it just sits there. I mean, the airplane's taking the whole thing. It's like race suspension. But it's hydraulic brakes operated by foot pedals in the cockpit, of course. Master cylinders are in the cockpit. Very, very rugged gear. And feel free to stick your nose up in here. There's the castings and the bushings and the control mechanisms for the gear is just enormous.
I've got a question kind of related to the gear. There's the steps on the back, but do you usually just go up the front?
Yeah, we sneak up this way. This is easier. You know, 21-year-old kids did that. It's a gymnastic move. I'll show you how it works. But as you get a little older, you prefer just to take from this is John. Sean. John.
Okay, I'm doing good.
Oh, you did.
Museum.
You did, absolutely.
Yeah.
Inside where the wheel well, where the wheel retracts in, under here with all the tubes and pipes.
First thing you guys had, you guys spare parts.
On your post-flight inspection,
Yes, sir.
post-flight, up here we got all the hydraulics and everything. Do they take this cowling off, or how do you inspect that?
No, all we do on post-flight is check the oil level and the hydraulic fluid level.
Okay.
And that there's 2 little covers.
But you're relying on it to not leak without looking at it from in here.
Well, if it leaks in there, it's out here somewhere. You see it on the outside of the airplane. It's anything that leaks in the airplane's coming out somewhere. And big things like this leak you see on the ground behind you, that's overnight. And if we came back and it wasn't leaking, that'd be unusual. If we come back and the leak is bigger than normal, then we look for some other thing. But that take a lot. Not much scares us about oil on the ground over there. R28.
I know I'm tricky because I worked on jets, so we weren't allowed leaks. You know.
Oh yeah. Well, leaks let us know we actually have oil in the airplane.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a big airplane. So we would have looked in the gear well for leaks or bends or cracks in the tubing, anything that looks like it's changed since the last flight. This gentleman's flown these things a lot. He ought to be doing this for us.
You take care of what the crew chief used to do.
Covers and little things just don't exist. So we fabricate most everything like that we need.
Is your engine a different dash than the other one?
Yes. It's like, there's all sorts of variants that would have been on the airplane depending on what time it entered service. These two entered service at about the same time, but this airplane, when this engine was rebuilt, I just configured different cylinders for it because they run cool. That's all. It's got a different set of cylinders, B cylinders. He has C cylinders.
Okay.
Same nose case. Other than that, these has transport cylinders on it because they run at a high power setting, lower airspeed, and they are finned differently to run. Just a choice.
Was this Ford engine or Pratt Whitney?
Well, it's Pratt Whitney. I think Ford may have built some for Pratt.
Yeah.
It's untelling. After this is not the original motor. This is,
Yeah.
4 or 5 motors later. Or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
I don't actually know.
Okay. And your name?
Zoom in on me. They're doing a checkoff list on the Wicked Wabbit and Hunter Hun, and this is 6:15:14. We're at the Evansville Airport behind Bill Sperling's hangar, and you're looking at him doing his checkoff list in the Wicked Wabbit. This is the P47, made here in Evansville, Indiana, at Indiana Division of Republic Aviation. They made over 6,200 of these planes. Both these planes were made in 1944. 1944. We've got 2 of them to take off. They may take off in synchrony, but they're doing the check on their engines. These engines are 2,000 horsepower that we heard earlier, and they can get up to an altitude up to 40,000 feet. They are very instrumental in World War II. We had an older pilot here, age 91. He flew a lot of missions off the island of Corsica, invasion of Italy in World War II. And he was here interviewed. We'll have him talk a little later, Mr. Sorensen from Henderson, but amazing to have him here. You see both these planes starting now. We tested them here in the Evansville area. In World War II,